Eric, thank you so much for doing this today. We really appreciate it. How you been since the game's finished?
Been good. Still pretty busy, but doing well.
Let's go back to the CrossFit
And I was a little sore in the few days after the games.
Fair enough. You were one of the crazy people who actually did some of those workouts. But let's go back to the games. How do you think everything played out?
We're extremely happy with it. Mm-hmm. You know, you're dealt a tough hand, and we also had to scramble and do things at the last minute. So it wasn't just navigating the changes in COVID, but as as we went through with the announcement and the acquisition, things were uncertain still as to whether there was even going to be a games. So there had been thought about it, but there were still kind of questions. So, Dave and team really did some scrambling, the last few months to get it all together. And even the stage 1, stage 2 concept was a relatively late breaking one.
And we heard some feedback on this a little bit. But in the days since, I'm curious if the mindset has shifted at all. But why was it important to have the CrossFit Games in 2020, even as we sit here a few months after the fact, or a few weeks?
Well, I think you could take it from a couple different angles. One, I think that the community really wanted something to rally around. Mm-hmm. Two is I thought it was important for me to show that the new leadership was committed to the sport of CrossFit, and that we thought, if executed in the right way, it would be very valuable to the affiliates and members all over the place, and something we could all kind of be proud of and felt like us. And then third, we just feel like we have this duty to crown the fittest man and fittest woman on earth. So there's just that too.
Mm-hmm. This is the last year of the Reebok sponsorship. We've been getting a lot of questions about what that means moving forward. So what is the latest on a title sponsor for 2021? And then the second part of that question would be, do you need to have a title sponsor in order to have the CrossFit Games?
Yeah, so those are good questions to tease apart. So I think that is likely but not certain that we will have a title sponsor for the games in 21 and beyond. I think it is possible and that title sponsor will be a footwear company, but it may not be. Others have expressed interest. Mm-hmm. And I also think it's very likely that we will have one or more strategic footwear partnerships, independent of whether those are title sponsors.
Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of curious, maybe to follow that up. And is there a particular focus, maybe sponsor-wise, in order, as far as like the philosophy with sponsors in the sport going forward, to kind of push it towards that level of professionalism, to where the ecosystem supports professional athletes, supports affiliates and communities in a better, I guess, financial sense?
Yeah, I think it is really important. The way I think of it's funny because we're actually having a partnerships meeting later today, but I think the first thing you do is you move towards a scenario where you think about partners as partners rather than as sponsors. So it's more than just a monetary exchange, and those are the ones we're most interested in working with, where there's we really believe in a brand and we want to help build them. So it's kind of like you'd do it even if it was free, and that there's mutual kind of interest in working together and building the pie. So I think pie expansion, I always think about it, and I built my last business very much through partnerships with companies like Facebook and Google and Amazon and so on. And I have a rule for partnerships, and I think pie expansion before pie division. So before you're trying to extract the maximum amount of money from somebody, you're really focusing on, what are you guys looking to do with your business? What are we looking to do with ours? And so I think great partners will bring more money into the sport, bring more kind of credibility into the sport, and create new opportunities for not just for CrossFit itself and the pro athletes who make their living with this competing, but also for affiliates and I think gym members and folks who become CrossFit coaches and so on will all benefit from the right partnerships that we drive. We got a lot of work to do, though. I mean, I think this is a multi-year progress, but we're seeing fruits already. As you guys know, there have been a lot of sponsors over the years with CrossFit. Not all of them would it be right to probably put the name partners on, but there have been some partnerships that have been really cool, and we'll see, I think, more and more of those.
Speaking of cool partnerships, the games were actually back on network TV this year for the first time since 2018, at least in the United States. They were on CBS. before we left in 2018, we had heard that they were very interested in content from the Open all the way through the games. So assuming that they're still interested, what would a potential partnership with CBS or another network look like?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting to us to think about not only a season of kind of the best athletes competing, but weaving this into competitions in the gym, the Open and beyond. And I think we will have the most vibrant kind of digital community competitive season that CrossFit's ever had in 21. Wow. And we're, Dave and I are hell bent on making that COVID proof. Mm-hmm. So COVID is not going to get us down in that quest. We're going to, I think it's likely we'll be seeing competition much more frequently than the Open itself. Mm-hmm. The Open will still be the big one. And, I've kind of gone on the record with this. The goal is to get that to 500,000 people in 21. Don't know if that's possible, but we're gonna kind of die trying. But we think that all that stuff is going to be, if we're thoughtful about it on the front end, it's all going to be very interesting kind of TV content. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, the networks are agreeing with that. They're really excited about it.
Cool.
And just kind of touching on the Open thing, when we were there was a big focus on the promotion of the Open, various pushes from a media sense to try and I don't know, say hype it up, but is there anything in particular that the company is particularly focused on right now to try and regenerate that interest in that kind of spirit of the Open that was such a big part of the sport?
We're just at the front end of kind of Open planning right now. But I think for some people, you're trying to make it to a certain level that's beyond just the Open itself. And so I'll give you a couple examples. Dave and I have already spent a bunch of time talking about, is it possible for people to make it to kind of a next round that is a serious cut, but not as tough a cut as it is right now? And I gave him my experience as a whatever you want to call it, slightly better than average masters athlete, where, I'd come in and I'd miss the top 200 in the world, but in a couple of years by just a little bit, mm-hmm. and then I was done. But I would have been incredibly excited to go further, and I just felt like, wow, I'm whatever top 5%ish, but I'm done. So I think we're thinking about how can people, how can more people who want to do this for the competitive aspect push forward, even if they're not at the most elite levels. We're also thinking very much about, and I think Dave's already talked about this, the notion that we really want great affiliate teams to be able to compete again the way the Affiliate Cup worked. Mm-hmm. And so how can we kind of separate the notion of kind of these super teams and affiliate teams, because both have a lot of merit. We want to see both.
Yeah.
And then I think, how do we make the Open maybe even more inclusive, especially in the age of COVID, to people who can't go into a gym, maybe don't have equipment, but still want to be part of it. So there's a lot of different avenues to play on. I think the other one that bears saying is I think you guys know, we've hired a head of international, Gary Gaines, and Gary, I think, is going to be more and more visible to people, and he's awesome. And so we are not treating international or countries outside the U.S. as an afterthought as we think about the Open. In fact, Gary and Dave are talking about that right now. So just trying to be U.S.-centric, less U.S.-centric mm-hmm. in our approach across the board.
What is the latest on whatever a 2021 season structure is going to wind up being?
So we will start the Open. I'll tell you the things we know for sure. We will start the Open this winter when mm-hmm. I speak about the northern hemisphere, right?
Yeah.
It will be winter in Brazil. It'll be in the summer, which is our second biggest market. So again, I want to be very culturally sensitive here. We typically have started the Open in February. Depending what's going on with COVID, it might make sense to start it a little bit later. Mm-hmm. We want to culminate in an in-person games, even if we can't have an audience. We are hopeful that we'll be able to, but we now know how to do this without an audience. Mm-hmm. And hopefully at a minimum, we'll be able to have more participants, even if we can't have a big audience. And that wants to be done by the end of the summer, especially if there's an audience, I think. So those are kind of the two things we know for sure. And then we will be working predominantly with event partners versus our own hosted events to kind of qualify people from the Open to get to the games. And And we will also we want to have a robust kind of optional post-game season for people. And again, if this were not a COVID year, I think you'd see a lot of other really great events going on in person throughout the season. Hard to say for sure to what extent those will be able to happen. But interestingly, if you look at two of our biggest markets, Brazil and Australia, knock on wood, they're in really good shape right now with COVID relative to others. But I think some of our big plans for Europe are tougher to think about right now in the age of COVID. But I can tell you one thing I'm really excited about is bringing the best European national champions together in person. That's really exciting. We learned, I think, from 2019, the format doesn't quite work to mix those with the top people in the world. It's well intended, doesn't quite work, but I do think there's room to have regional competitions of the country's best that'll be really fun and exciting for people.
And so event partners, we're looking at maybe like sanctioned event owners, people that have already been invested into the system to try and continue to take that ball and run with it as that like middle portion for the season. As I guess we traditionally think like the open middle section games is that like.
Yeah, okay. But think about it as an after season as well that will be serious and we'll be bringing prize money into this. So one of the key things when we think about event partners, and again, we can use the term sanctional for historical reference, but I don't think, again, I think these more as partners. A sanction says you can go do your thing. We're less laissez-faire than the prior administration, as you know, and we're actually going to be really investing in helping these guys succeed. It's hard to run an events business, and I think CrossFit at our best is going to be less about being an events business. We will hold a couple, but we're more about kind of the sport of CrossFit and helping these other event operators succeed. So with all the infrastructure and scale that they need, including a robust media schedule, bringing sponsorships, et cetera, and promoting the hell out of these events as well, which is something CrossFit hasn't done in the past, I think.
You answered my follow-up. I was just going to say, because I know we had talked about some of this when you're kicking our butts in a workout earlier this morning about some of the ways that CrossFit can support these event partners at a way that will also allow them to be able to maintain, for lack of a better term, the cultural integrity of their event and what kind of makes them unique. Again, that's good to hear.
Tommy, I gotta do a factual verification here. You're in thin air relative to sea level, and I was chasing you. So just to be clear about who kicked whose ass, that was you.
I was going to say, if we had maybe another minute and a half, I think you would have got me because I emptied the tank.
I think it was, were my box jumps going to hold up longer than your toes to bar, right? That's the only question. And I needed another 5 minutes, I think.
I was on the other side of the room watching going, ooh, okay, those guys are going pretty hard.
You saw the little core challenge afterwards. I had very little left in the tank as far as the midline.
I had a lot more left because my toes to bar sucked. So that was the good news.
We had 28 sanctioned events that were on the schedule for this past year. Obviously, a ton of them got canceled, but how do you incorporate 28 into whatever the new season is going to be? Or is there even room for 28?
Yeah. I don't know. So Dave would be a better one to ask that question. My sense is if you think about 28, if you think about events to qualify people to go for the games, we definitely don't want or need that many. Mm-hmm. Again, Dave is better one to talk about the details here, but the way to think about it is improving the notion of regionals, right? Doing it in a better way. And Dave actually did a lot of quant analysis around how to get the right number of the right population of open participants, the right representation in the games and so on, but have those run by third parties and have them run in their inimitable style. I mean, one of the things we all love about CrossFit is every box has its own unique twist. Every event has its own unique twist. But we can have certain standards around judging and programming and safety and quality of media and everything else, so people know this is a CrossFit event. You'll be able to wear the CrossFit name, even if you have your own funky name and do your own funky thing. We're totally fine with that. In fact, we endorse it and applaud it, right? We like our crazy ecosystem. I mean, it's why we all, the only reason I opened a gym was because I could put my own imprint on it. I wouldn't have been interested, right, otherwise. So these 27, 28 events, I think there'll be more and more. And I think there are a lot of events that haven't been sanctionals in the past that probably will emerge over the coming years too. They won't necessarily be games qualifying events, but again, by bringing prize money into an after season and different styles of events, we've even talked about things like, can we do smaller team against team events or one-on-one events that would be kind of very good for broadcast, may not be as in-person-y, but would be great in the age of COVID. All these things are on the table right now.
And kind of we've touched on the individuals and a little bit of the teams as well. And I'm curious, what are the discussions going on right now around any changes or opportunities for the masters, teenage divisions, or even potential new divisions like the adaptive athletes, and any opportunities to be more inclusive in that regard?
Well, so I'll hit the last one first. I'm really psyched to say, and I don't think we've announced this yet, but I think we're doing the work so that we're able to have separate adaptive athlete categories in the Open.
Awesome.
And so,
nice. Wow.
as you guys may know, I'm just getting educated on this. There are a lot of different categories of adaptive athletes. And so I can't say we're going to nail it the first time around, but we're going to make steps in that direction. And I just approved the budget to do the adaptive athlete stratification last week.
Oh, awesome.
So I know that the team is working on that, and I'm hopeful that we'll get it done this year. And if we don't, we'll have it definitely in good shape for the following year.
Cool.
On kind of age group athletes, another thing that we're looking into right now, I got contacted. They're just, as you guys know, there's so many great people and cool entrepreneurs coming up with new ideas in the CrossFit ecosystem, not necessarily for profit. And one of them is a PhD candidate at CU here in Boulder. He's in the engineering school, and he also happens to be the baddest ass athlete at our box. And I'll give him a shout out. It's Robert Wagner Wags, and he has started this CU, or joined maybe, and has expanded on this CU college CrossFit club. And so he was interested in how can we create a network of clubs at colleges around the country. And I said, well, this is really interesting because there's a Yale law school professor who has a group of law students at Yale doing this. And then I had the team look, and there are 45 affiliates at colleges and universities around the world. And so the question is, how do we foment this ecosystem? And one thing we can do that we're looking into is to allow people to not only say if they're a student when they sign up for the Open, but what if we could all put our alma maters in as well?
Love it.
Oh,
That's awesome.
Cool, right?
Yeah.
I get crushed because I went to Michigan, which has more living alums than any other school. But so little things like that are so cool. And because we're all competitive as hell, and because we all geek out on the stats, I'm sure that if you give me more boxes, I could cut it some way that I'd be one of the top people in the world. You know what I mean? My block in Boulder, I'm definitely top 10.
I every year I make a leaderboard for when you used to be able to make a custom one of all the people in the world with the last name Marquez. And one of our good friends that we used to work with also, I call him my brother from another mother because his last name's Marquez too. And we're really close, but that was our goal, to be the fittest Marquez.
Who is the fitter Marquez of the two of you?
Oh. I've gotten him a few more, yeah. But there's been some underhandedness and strategizing in the Open, which has been pretty fun. But
I'm pretty confident that of Roza spelled with a Z instead of an S. I think I take that one.
There you go. Yeah, see?
It's like three of us in the world. Yeah. It's awesome.
Speaking of the Open, you mentioned that you want to get it back to 500,000 in the past couple of years. We've seen a decline.
And that would be a record, by the way. We've never hit
no doubt,
5
right?
yet.
But
Yeah.
in the past couple of years, we've seen a decline. What are the steps that you're planning on taking to help rebuild that interest and get the sign up numbers to that?
Well, one of the interesting things when you look at CrossFit is the company was run as kind of these three pretty separate businesses, right? Where you had kind of the media sports side, you had the training side, which was not as media focused, although Nicole had her own shadow media effort on social, and then you had the affiliate business, which didn't have anyone really leading it. And so the first thing is to kind of integrate all three and really have the affiliate business and pull the affiliates in so that they're helping us to get the word out with the Open in I know some things have been done in the past where I think some sheets have been sent out and people were asked to put these up in their gym. But to be honest, I never even heard about those as an affiliate owner. So I think part of it is if you look at, the bulk of, we've got 14,000 boxes around the world. We got a lot of people doing CrossFit in their home gyms and so on, is really using that group to get the word out to others. And we probably also will do a bunch of media that's really focused on getting the word out, including mainstream media. So it'll be kind of a whole plan around this. Now, that said, we don't have a marketing department yet. And so we're looking now for a chief marketing officer and so on. But so my expectations aren't insanely high that we'll be able to knock it out of the park on this. But I think just the effort of doing it will result in a lot of good. And so I think and as I said, I think a lot of language support and in-language work will make a big difference here. We're working to see if we can do things and things like in local currency and be more thoughtful about countries that have much lower purchasing power and so on the registration fees. In some countries $20 is a lot of money to register and so on. So I don't know if part of this is quite frankly software constraints right now. So I don't know if we'll be able to get all that stuff done in time. But I'm confident that we'll put a lot more effort into this than we ever have, and we'll do we'll do really, really well compared to what's been done recently. And I am hopeful that I want the community to rally around this number of 500,000. Like I want us all to feel ownership to like, we're going to get this number up. Like I want you guys talking about it. I want everybody fired up. Right. So we'll see.
Yeah. And it sounds, and this is new for us too. There's this kind of unification going on amongst the what were considered the three platforms that you mentioned, as far as messaging, and it always felt like in the past the games was a good loudspeaker for some of the CrossFit messaging, but there was a disconnect between those almost silos that didn't allow it to fully kind of hit that lockstep. And I'm kind of curious, what are some of the core messages once you get that synergy between them all that really stand out right now, at least in the early months as you're kind of developing that in this new era?
Well, I think what I found when I came on board and talked to hundreds of people, a couple things is I found the narrative that the games is that focus on the games is kind of bad, is at the expense of affiliates. I didn't find that to be a widely held belief. I felt some people definitely felt that way, but I felt it was more in the way the stories were told and the fact that we didn't see the sport of CrossFit as being in service of the affiliates, right? I've talked a bit about over the last few days with the town hall and so on, and internally for a few weeks now, that we are explicitly affiliate first in all our thinking, right? It's a brutal time to be an affiliate. So what are we doing in the business of sport and around partnerships and sponsorships that is in the interest of affiliates? What are we doing around training that's in interest of the affiliates and so on? And I'll give you one example on that latter point. CrossFit has always done level ones in person, right, until COVID. And then Dave and Nicole did a rapid pivot when COVID hit, and in April launched the first online level one. But it was available only to people as a revalidation. So it was, and we always train in up to 80 markets, but frankly, some of those countries, we had very few classes. And if they're a really big country, you might have to go thousands of miles to attend one, literally, right? And if it's sold out, you're kind of in trouble. Now we try to schedule more, but then you have scheduling issues. So once we kind of jumped in with the online level one for revalidation, we then said, when I joined, Nicole and I spent a lot of time and we said kind of, why don't we try launch this as a new cert, the online level one cert, just like colleges and universities have online degrees. And it doesn't need to be a reval. It can be a first time, but it's called out as an online level one, just so there's, people know when they're looking to hire you or whatever you're talking about the credential, it's an online level one credential. And we initially limited that to the markets we typically train in where we couldn't access them for COVID reasons. And then we expanded beyond, I think we started with 30 markets. Now we're in over 100 markets because we're training in a lot of markets where we haven't been able to train before. And a lot of these are really small, and maybe we'll get one or two people to take it. But what's really cool when you think about being in service of affiliates is by the end of the year, I think we'll be training in well over 150 markets, maybe 180 markets.
Wow.
Which, that's about, you're getting close to the, all the countries in the world. I think when you get close to 200, I don't know the exact number. And these are all places that may have a box someday. Or if not, we'll have somebody training outside with their friends on some little island somewhere, and we'll know that they took the online level one, which is the best thing we could do for them. And that's super exciting. And so when you start to put this affiliate first lens on and say, our job is a healthy, thriving, growing ecosystem of boxes around the world coming out of COVID. we know COVID is brutal, and hopefully we'll talk more about what we're doing in the U.S. with this new legislation we just announced and so on. And so we're going to try to help as many boxes as possible survive COVID, but we know that this is a brutal time for people. And so my rallying cry is coming out of COVID, this really healthy, thriving box ecosystem that sees us as their partners, value added, helping them succeed, and they're recruiting other boxes, and we're growing the whole ecosystem in every country in the world, in every corner of the world.
You mentioned the legislation. Why was it important for you to sort of sign on to that group effort that included people outside of the CrossFit ecosystem?
Yeah, well, what happened was really interesting is Andrew, our head of comms and policy, came to me a few months ago, and he and Brett, who you guys know is a longtime CrossFit team member who's based in DC and has always been kind of the policy and government guy, had cooked up this idea on their own to introduce a bill. And it's called the Gyms Bill. And it was basically like, look, if the restaurants are going after all this relief, everyone can eat at home, but you're really like you're more healthy eating at home. I love restaurants, by the way, but you're more healthy eating at home. But for a lot of us, we really do our best work working out in a community in the box. And so if gyms are way more threatened than restaurants are right now, a lot more of them are closing down, a lot more of them are going to be impacted economically. The restaurants have this huge relief bill. We need to create our own. And then Andrew came to me and he said, do you think it would be sacrilege if we pulled in folks from outside of CrossFit? I said, I think it would be really smart to do that. So I'm good with sacrilege. You know what I mean? I just want to make the right move here. I don't tend to look at precedent and say it's inviolable. I tend to reassess and say, we said, we have a lot more in common with folks outside of the CrossFit world who are focused on getting people healthy than we have, anything to quibble with them about. And so my first call was to the CEO of MindBody, who obviously has a big investment in CrossFit's health, but a big investment in other gyms' health.
Yeah.
And he said, we're in. And so I hooked him up with Andrew, and then he said, do you want to meet the CEO of Orange Theory and talk to him about it? And I said, hell yeah, I want to meet him in general. They've done an incredible job. Maybe we have something to learn from each other. And so we had a great chat, Dave and I, and he said, I'm in. And then we brought in a number of other gyms, and probably the one that's the most interesting and surprising is that why would Zumba be part of it? They don't even run gyms, but their trainers tend to work out in independent gyms, tend to run their classes in independent gyms. And Alberto Perelman, who is the founder and CEO of Zumba, is an amazing guy who I didn't know until he reached out to me after the announcement. Committed CrossFitter. I think he did Murph, 50 days in a row or something during COVID. And he's a great guy. And he's been a real mentor to me, actually, in thinking about the business and how to do it right. And so he said, it's incredibly valuable to me to have a place for my instructors to go, places for them to go to keep running these Zumba classes. And so they signed on as well. So you get this, there's this term, right, that politics makes for odd bedfellows. You get kind of these odd bedfellows. Yeah. But like, we're CrossFit, we're all about odd bedfellows. Yeah. It's like what we live and breathe is odd bedfellows,
Exactly. Oh, man.
So, and I think, though, getting back to it, if this were a CrossFit initiative, 0.0 chance of getting any traction in DC. Right? No one wants a self-interested branded initiative getting government relief, but now this is a relief for all the gyms in the US. And what's really cool about it is the way it's structured is there's a cap on how much any one gym owner can get, which means that almost all the money is going to go to independent gym owners. So the biggest gym owners in the world can get millions of dollars, but they can't get tens of millions. And we're going after tens of billions. So more than 90% of this money is going to go to people who own one location, which is right up our alley.
Yeah.
And it will literally save, it'll save thousands of gyms in the U.S. I think it actually could save a couple thousand CrossFit gyms in the U.S.
Wow.
And it will multiply that by however many average coaches per gym, that many coaching jobs as well. And it'll, by the way, it provides relief to independent contractors in a way that the PPP bill does not, because you have to be an employee for that.
Yeah.
So most of our coaches are obviously independent contractors, so it will pay lost wages for that.
Wow.
And we're very hopeful. We're not 100% confident this will go through, but we have a very real shot. And what's going to really determine it we're hopefully going to have this introduced into Congress by some great folks on both sides of the aisle, and what we're then going to do is a strong grassroots campaign to get the word out, and we're going to have a website, and everybody who goes to the gym in the U.S. and anyone who knows anyone who goes to the gym in the U.S., which is everyone, we're going to really be getting the word out to say, go to the site. It's really easy. You'll be able to enter some information. It'll email your local congressperson. And you can also call them. So it'll make it really easy for people. And it literally matters. Like if we can get tens of millions of people doing this, chances of this bill passing become quite positive. And what's so cool about this is we as a community now can save our gyms, which is like, you couldn't ask for like a more noble calling right now, you know?
Yeah. That kind of touching on another aspect of the community in terms of diversity. And one of the things that stood out during the first town hall was the discussion around DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when you talk about how like CrossFit is such a mixed bag of people in all walks, like that obviously is very important. What are some plans in order to try and get more people of color and underserved communities involved in CrossFit? And is there any forethought into a timeline on how you want to see this trickle up towards the sport, whether it's at the games level, at regionals level, forward-facing athletes, and kind of ambassadors of the community?
Yeah. Well, this is obviously an incredibly complex issue, especially when you look that we're on a global stage, and even notions of equity and inclusion and diversity are very different in different countries around the world. But so if I kind of answer the question from a U.S. perspective to start, and from what we're doing at the corporate level, we got a lot of feedback early on, and I convened folks out here right after the announcement, and we talked a bunch about this. Is just like one thing that we could do right away with some of the imagery, was just the imagery of these like uber fit white American dudes, frankly, like, let's mix that up a little bit. I'm like, good, you got an old guy now running the business, you know, so we'll mix that up.
Old fit guy.
And old fit guy, maybe. So that's something we've been trying to address. At probably the most challenging end would be what you mentioned, which is we need more diverse games athletes. I mean, the issue there is it's got to be a test of fitness, right? And we can't make accommodations, or at least we haven't figured out a way to make accommodations to accelerate that process, because we know it takes people a number of years. And what we're increasingly seeing is, folks like Justin and Haley, that really people starting in their teens, right, and making it through. What we need to do is get people in their mid and late teens into CrossFit who are in communities that are more diverse. I mean, that's really the way, if we talk about the game side. But I'll step away from that. I don't want to spend all the time talking about that, although it's very important, and just think about what do we do overall. One of the things that I'm super conscious of is we were talking about this after the WOD today. CrossFit is effectively a public trust right now. It's an institution, right? We all feel like it's a thing that we're kind of part of, and it's not, we don't think of it as a business and all that, but there is a little business within CrossFit. There's 100 odd people who actually are employees of CrossFit. And one of the things that we can do is lead from the front on here, right? So, as an example, I now have 3 direct reports who are people of color, and we've got a board member who's a person of color, and so on. So we're not like waving the flag and saying mission accomplished, and we're not even really. I don't think I've ever quoted those numbers before, so you guys get the scoop on that. Right. But these are important things, right? So you have to start walking what you're talking about. We are also. I hired someone who is not a person of color. Who was a former colleague of mine, Trish Gerlitz, to lead culture and inclusion, which includes both HR within CrossFit, but more broadly, culture and inclusion in the whole community as well. And she's in the process of putting together a system to recruit a DEI council that will be comprised of people who don't work for us, right, who are independent voices from across different aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion, primarily with a U.S. focus initially, but we will broaden it after that. And we've had a lot of unofficial discussions, and we'll be putting out applications for that and so on. Please don't ask me for those. Those will be put out shortly. And that group will be tasked with helping us figure out what to focus on and how to focus on it. The one thing that I've learned in the past months is two things. One, as you said, Tommy, is that CrossFit really embraces diversity, like at its best. This is who we are. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think walking that talk is going to be as hard or as awkward for us as it is for some other organizations where you got a bunch of old white dudes in ties, running them and so on at the board level. Like, we don't have that thing going on. And so I think we'll be able to authentically walk that really well in the areas where we haven't been as consistent so far. One of our goals is to kind of issue kind of some level of, like, I've talked a little bit about this internally with the company, not externally, but kind of what's our ethos. And when you open a box or when you take an L1, when you kind of say you're part of CrossFit, even if you don't work for us, you kind of sign up to these beliefs, that it's self-policing, that you're going to be a good person and you're going to welcome everybody. Like, those are non-negotiables for us. We don't want you being part of the CrossFit family if you can't sign up to both kind of seeing I think it's two things. You see the common humanity in everyone, no matter what they look like or talk like or act like or anything else. So you see that common humanity, and you also honor and respect their differences and realize that makes us all better. Mm-hmm. And so I think those are the two non-negotiable table stakes, other than what we're already doing with the affiliate ecosystems and trainers. And I think people getting acclimated to that on the way in is going to actually do even more to make us all better people, which is the business we're in already. But it's going to be it's a process. We're going to go through it a long time. We're fortunate that a number of the folks that we brought onto the team have actually led DEI efforts in big ways at places like Harvard Business School and Domino's Pizza and Equinox and Lyft, some really big. We're fortunate that some of our execs and board members have been central leaders to these DEI efforts, and we're going to be able to bring a lot of best practices in as well.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned in some of your previous interviews that when you first purchased this company, there's a huge learning curve. So now that we're kind of past that initial, I guess, drinking from a fire hose stage, what are some of the things that you've learned about CrossFit as a company and what you need to do to run it effectively?
Well, I'll set the record straight. The learning curve is still insane ahead of me. It really is. I'm not just saying that's not like false humility. I'm still on this ramp, and the fire hose is
still
maybe it's in another orifice now or something. But it's still on pretty hard right now. So I think I'm learning that there are so many different stakeholders who care a ton about this, have a ton of passion, and that they don't necessarily represent one another. So that's the beauty and the challenge of a complex situation, a non-homogeneous culture like ours, is that you can't say, oh, I talked to so-and-so, even so-and-so of a certain race or gender or sexual preference or whatever, so I know what this group is thinking. Like, it just doesn't work that way because we're all individuals. And so one of the things is, like, definitely a realization you can't please everybody, right? Yeah. So we're not going to try to please everybody. We're going to try to do the right thing. And I've always been someone who's comfortable moving quickly and making mistakes. Facebook had this saying in the early days: "Move fast and break things." Mm-hmm. We worked with them, and I always really liked that. Like, we're going to break some stuff, and we accept that as it's not a downside. It's actually a feature, not a bug, of moving quickly. Yeah. And because part of what you get good at is when you break stuff is you fix it quickly and you own your mistakes and you're humble about it and you get better. So I think those are some of the things I'm learning. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's so cool that for a living I get to hang out with you guys and work out with you guys and host you at my house. And it's just like, I pinch myself at how cool that is. By the same token, this job is stressful as shit. Like, just be really clear here. I'm not I'm not trying to pretend I'm Mr. Cool under pressure here. Like, it's incredibly stressful. Trying to help this ecosystem weather some of the challenges that resulted from Floyd 19 and so on, from and the sentiment in the ecosystem, trying to bring people back from that, trying to help the ecosystem survive COVID, find a lot of people who actually I thought were really, really good, who we wanted back in the fold, who had been alienated over years. And I'm not saying that they were innocent in this alienation, right? It's always a relationship thing, but I don't care. I don't come with that baggage. I just say, like, you're a great person. I want you back in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then trying to build a team from scratch, as you know, and you guys both know Greg well. You both know Greg better than I do. Greg didn't make bones about the fact that he wasn't running CrossFit as a business, right? I mean, that kind of happened by accident. Mm-hmm. I am running CrossFit as a business, but I want to be clear here. Like, that's not a bad word. Like, the best businesses in the world make the best products in the world, and they have the happiest team members in the world, and you can have an incredible mission in addition to the financial motive. And it's not in spite of, it's actually, in a weird way, it's kind of because of this. The market tells you what they value by how much they're willing to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
And so you go, wow, well, I'll give you one example. Is the affiliate fee too high or too low? Well, I think a lot of affiliates, including me, would say, well, it's kind of felt too high because I got to use the name, but all the other great information about CrossFit was available to me for free on the website, right? Mm-hmm. And so you could take the position, well, the fee's too high, or I live in another country where the per capita income's much lower. But you could also say, well, wait, look at all these other businesses that have this broad number of stores or whatever, whether they're franchises or other things, licensees, et cetera. They pay a lot more as a percentage of revenue. Mm-hmm. And so you say, well, is it too high or too low? Well, you take the business perspective, and it's complex, and you say, well, we're clearly not going to raise the fees for CrossFit, right? Because what we want to do is offer more value to affiliates. And then a lot of that we're going to do for free, and it's going to cost us millions of dollars, and we're already doing it. We've already started doing it. And so we're compromising a lot of the profit that CrossFit has historically made to create more value for affiliates right now. That's the business we're in right now.
Yeah.
Ultimately, coming out of COVID and so on, we're going to have more and more services that, if we look at all of our ecosystem participants, that gym members, that box owners, that trainers and so on, will be able to opt into and help us create. And that will create new income for them, for the people who are helping to create it. And it'll create better business models for the affiliates. Our affiliates, and I think have either of you guys ever owned a box or not?
I have, yeah.
Yes, I haven't.
It's not a great business model right now, right? You do it for love. I mean, that's certainly, I was fortunate because I had another business. Not to say we weren't profitable, but we also had the benefit of having 400 members, and that's a little different. But I believe we can make our affiliates much, much better businesses. Or I shouldn't say we can make them, we can help them become much, much better businesses. There's a lot to learn. And one of the things that I always wondered about is, why am I having to figure all this stuff out for myself? Like, I don't want to spend all the time on this. Like, I don't want to have to train our new guy who's working the front desk to do social media marketing. Like, why isn't there a system that So there's a lot of things like that we won't shove onto people, we won't force onto people, but they will be there if they want them. And what we're doing right now, which is really cool, coming out of the town hall last week, is we came up with about a dozen initiatives that we either are working on or we're thinking about working on, and we asked the affiliate owners themselves, fill out this survey, let us know what's most important to you. 1, to survive COVID, and 2 is to thrive beyond COVID, and prioritize these. And so this isn't a democracy. I'm running a business here. I'll make the final decisions, but the votes and the input from the community will be massively important. And if they say, we need you spending more time helping us keep our members safe from COVID, that's very different than we need a digital leadership forum, or we want to have more influence on the people who make our software to make it work better for us, or we want to get more discounts on stuff we buy for our gyms. These are the kinds of things completely different from each other that we can create for them, and they're going to help point us at them. And I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah. I was going to say, and you might have touched on a few there. Can you share any of those initiatives that you sent out that maybe were really important to you guys, or you found so far that have been really poignant as far as like the community's response?
One thing, so The one of the ways that I talk about CrossFit, this is the what we do. See if this resonates for you guys. And I try to come up with something that's what we do in the gym, but it's also what we do at CrossFit at the company, and it's what I think people in the ecosystem do as they think about bettering themselves as humans outside the gym. And so the phrase is, we transform ourselves in the crucible of coaching, community, and hard work. And so when I thought about like everything that we do, I want to be thinking about this. It's we transform ourselves, not just others. We're part of it. We're on this journey. It's about full transformation. There's this crucible, right, which comes from alchemy, I think, right? It's literally it's magic. It's where the magic happens. And it's these three indispensable components of coaching, community, and hard work. And I thought about it and I thought, man, as a box owner, I have my community of people who come to the gym, but it's lonely at the top, right? Tommy, you've been there, and I know what it's like when you're running a business. At the end of the day, it's you in the room by yourself. And when shit hits the fan, it's you, right? Yeah. And it's different during the WOD when you're with your buddies and all that. And so I think there's a huge opportunity, and we're starting this now, to create a community of box owners around the world who are networked with each other. And I'll give you two different initiatives that we're, one we've already started to roll out. The other one, I think we're going to pilot. We haven't announced it yet. So You guys are getting a scoop again.
All right.
And you're earning it by asking really good questions. So the first one is a software platform that I introduced at my last company. It's called Givitas, and it makes it really easy for people to ask for and give advice. And part of it is to benefit from the advice, but part of it is just, it feels really good to ask for help, and it feels really good to give help. Mm-hmm. And so we've rolled that out now in Australia and New Zealand as of last week. Wow. And we're going to be rolling it out. If it works well and if people are excited about it, we're going to roll it out worldwide. And so this is a closed community. It's really important, not a social network. You can't get in unless you're a current affiliate owner. And these are moderated forums, and the only goal is to ask for and give advice to people. In a way that just makes the world smaller, but also helps you learn from what others have learned. And we know people in our community are so giving. So that's one community builder. Another community builder that I'm really excited about, that we're looking into right now, is some kind of a leadership forum where it's much more of a live discussion on Zoom, where you can get together with a handful of other box owners. Again, it'll be a moderated discussion, and just share challenges and learnings from your life. And I came across a version of this in an organization I used to be part of that's called YPO, that is the biggest CEOs organization around the world. And I talked to a few different friends and said, hey, will you help me adapt this for CrossFit? Right? So we basically have CEOs of all these boxes around the world. How can we help give them a community and make them better leaders and better humans? And you get support not just on your business life, but on your personal side and on your family side. It's really, really cool. And so that can be really game changing for people. So that's another experiment that we're likely to roll out in the coming months. Yeah. And so there'll be more. It's always thinking about, like, what can we do as this global organization? How can we better support this community and not have people reinvent the wheel over and over again?